Hey everybody, welcome back. We're back in the garage again finally for the last few weeks here. And I had a long list of things on my to-do list, which I really wanted to get to. And the thought of the German air show coming up in about 8 weeks really got me going because I wanted to make sure that the car was ready to be driven all the way up there from Chicago. But there were a lot of things on the to-do list. I'm going to wind up covering all of that in separate videos, such as the things that were done to the exhaust and heater boxes, the, what else was there? Taking the engine out and basically cleaning off all of the tins and other things along the way, which I took advantage of, like, the engine being out and making the panels for the inside. I'll cover those in a separate video. I'll cover some 3D printing of parts that I started making for various components here. But the one thing I'm going to focus on this video is one issue that came up several times. People asking me at shows, and there was even someone that posted a question on the Chapter 18 video. And the one issue that remained was the oil breather. And this was in regards to something I thought about when I first installed it. A couple of people have asked me at shows. Someone actually commented on it in the Chapter 18 video. And the issue is around when you add oil, because when you take this cover off, you can see that there's two ports at the bottom. Those go to your valve covers. And the question was always like, well, when you add oil, doesn't it flow down these instead of going to the oil filler tube? Doesn't it go down these and to your valve covers? And I was like, well, yeah, the answer is yes. Gravity does take precedence here. But even though it goes down to your valve covers, it's eventually going to come down your push rod tubes and get back to your case. Not an issue that I see if you're doing an oil change and you know how much oil you're going to be putting back in here. But I see it as an issue if you're at a service station or on the side of the road or in your garage and you just need to top it off a little bit. How long will it take for this oil to go through that entire process before it finally gets here and you could take your dipstick out to get an accurate reading of how much oil is in there? I don't know. I don't want to know. I would rather much have some kind of a fitting to go between here and the filler spout or the filler neck on the cover. And I toyed around with the idea of using maybe something like copper tubing, because there's 90-degree elbows that would be required for the end right here. But making prototypes with copper tubing could probably, get a little pricey, because, you cut a piece and it's too short or it's too long. Now you have to make another one. You make a cut in it. Oh, wrong place. Now you got to start all over. And you can go through a bunch of copper in the prototype process. So I wanted to find something that was cheaper, that I had plenty of, wouldn't cost me anything. And I looked around the garage and found one item that would actually work out pretty good if I could make it work. And that was 1-inch conduit and a 1-inch conduit coupler. That seemed to work out really well because I was able to cut the conduit at 45-degree angles and then just use a MIG welder to put them back together again. The coupler just had to cut off the small lip that's on one end, take off the two screws and cut off the bosses, and file them smooth so that they weren't on there anymore. And the one thing that was a surprise was that with that small lip along the edge, keeping it on the front was almost a perfect fit for the front cover here. The only thing I added was an O-ring right behind that lip, and I put another one here farther behind, just so that it wouldn't rattle around. And that they keep it in place, and at the same time, it still provides some flexibility to move in one direction or another, or up or down. And that comes in handy because when you're getting it in there. Oh, and I did have to cut a slot because the angles are different here. The filler tube there is like at a 45, and here it's going to wind up being somewhere around 20 or 30 degrees. So I had to make this little cut here, and then I made a couple of extra holes just so that as any air is coming out of the case, it can actually exit right at the edge of this cut, which is still going to be exposed, along with the 2 holes that I drilled in, which will allow any of that air to either go upwards or downwards, whichever the flow is going to be going inside of these things. But by having that little bit of wiggle room, it comes in handy because you could actually push it away and line it up with the oil filler tube inside, and then at that point it kind of slides in, and you just have to reposition at the front because the O-rings allow everything to still move around inside. And that seemed to work pretty well, in my opinion. And yes, it does sit down far enough that you still have plenty of room for the threads on your cap. So with that done, I figured I'd make a quick video on it, explain what the process was, what materials were used, and if anybody's interested in making one of these, I'm going to add the dimensions as a graphic right after this video. I'll have the measurements on there, and I'll kind of step you through the procedure for making it using that graphic. So if you do wind up making one, or you have any questions about it, just post a comment on there. If you do make it, it'd be great to be able to see some pictures of what you did, or just like I said, just write comments of any concerns or anything you go forward with, as well as if you have any other ideas, because I know one of the ideas I had was, since I was doing all this 3D printing, was, well, what if I could make that out of a 3D print as well? And the good thing about that was that I could make a nice smooth curve instead of that 90 degree. And that would most likely allow me to slide it in from the front, all in one piece instead of having to assemble the 2 halves. So I went ahead and tried that, and lo and behold, it actually came out pretty good. Even the part where the coupler is at fits right in there. Same thing, just put an O-ring or 2 on here. And but obviously I can't use this one because it's a material that will deform between 120 and 140 degrees. So I have to switch over to ABS on this. And I'll tell you right now, printing with ABS is a pain because you wind up with deformities when it's printing because of the fact that it contracts fast as it's printing. The bottom layers get laid down, and as those are cooling, the hotter ones on top sit on it, and they start contracting, and they start pulling up on the bottom layers. So you have to do a lot of finagling with settings and temperatures and making sure there's no movement of air going anywhere around there. So that's something I'm still playing around with. These are still my prototypes, and hopefully this will be the last one. Well, actually, this is the one that I made for the negative, which I think should be a good one. I think I still have to make another one. Yeah, I still have to make another one for this guy. But yeah, just figured I'd clean up that side of the engine bay as well, and make this video to address the concern that some of you have had, and along with myself, and a possible solution. So let me know what you think, and let me know if you have any other ideas on other methods that we might want to try on here. But for now, I hope this works out for some of you guys, and until next time, take care.